Bloody Kuningtou, 1949. This is a war game that comes with the Chinese magazine board war game, issue number 1. The publisher some months ago sent me a big box with a lot of their magazines and games. I can't read the magazines because they are in Chinese and I don't read Chinese. But I like to look at the pictures of Chinese people playing war games because it gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling to know that there are wargaming brothers in faraway lands and that we share the same passion. The game also comes with a board game. The game, it's a war game. Actually, it comes with two. This is a smaller game, and then the main game is the one I'm going to tell you about, which is Bloody Kuningtou. So I can't read the magazine, but the PDF files are available with the instructions in English, and I simply printed them out. It's not many pages. It is 12 pages, including, however, a player aid, a list of reminders. So I would say that the main rules really are 10 pages with examples and illustrations. Definitely a simple war game. The topic, Bloody Kuningtou, well, you see a section of the island of Kuningtou that was the theater of a battle in the war right after World War II, in the war between China and the Kuomintang. Here the Kuomintang is defending this island, which is in the strait between China and Taiwan. The communist forces are coming from the north. You see the setup X's there. They have those red outlines. So the communists will come from there. The Kuomintang units are defending various areas of the island, especially the northern coast, and this area here with an important city, the city of Kinmen. And it's a very traditional hex encounter game. It is so simple actually that probably it could be an introductory war game for somebody who has never played war games. Because yes, I should also point out that of these 12 pages of rules, of which some are player aids and things like that, a section is for advanced rules that you do not need to use at all. You could just play the game as an incredibly basic move attack war game. The game comes with a set of counters, which I stored in this GMT counter trace. The counter trace is not included with the game. You probably know that, but I thought I would point it out. Units are divided, as I told you earlier, in communist units and Kuomintang units. Units have two values printed on them: combat and movement. This is how simple. This is really the basic of wargaming. There also are activation chits. The activation chits are placed in a cup and then they are drawn randomly, one after the other. And each time an activation chit is drawn, the units of the corresponding group can be activated by the player. For example, this chit activates the units of the 82. There are also activation chits that activate larger groups. For example, this chit here, which only enters the game in turn 2, will activate the 11th, 118th, and the number 3, which is an armor group, which is by far the most powerful group that this is made of the most powerful units that the Kuomintang player has. There is some artillery that together with tanks can also perform long-range attacks. And then there are tactical chits. Tactical chits are only included in the advanced rules, so pretty much the advanced rules simply add the tactical chits and reinforcements. Tactical chits can be used by the owning player. You simply flip them down to show that you use them. They may enter the game not in turn 1. For example, this one enters in turn 2. This one, for example, allows you extra activation of units in 3 contiguous axes. This one gives the Chinese player an attack using the 105 millimeters. the Chinese player needs to have a unit adjacent to axes where there are enemy units in the south. So pretty much what this diagram shows you is where you need to have one of your units and where you can then perform your attacks. Things like that. Bombers. This is a very powerful cheat. Different types of advantages that can be spent in different moments of a turn, and that give extra options to the players. So what we have here is a pretty straightforward chit pull game. The players set up on the board according to the instructions. To give you a sense, here is the setup, so I don't have to do it myself. With the communist units coming from the north, big piles of reinforcements, especially for the Kuomintang player, and the Taiwanese units, the Kuomintang units defending here. Very basic chit and chit pull game. Players alternate pulling chits, and they activate units. An activated unit can move up to its full movement allowance, and movement is affected by terrain. Different types of terrain will have different types of costs, and once the movement has been completed, the players can the player can use the activated units to attack adjacent enemy units. I don't know if what I'm doing here makes any sense. I'm just creating a sort of like fictional situation. As I said, active units move, and then they can attack. They can attack enemy units that are adjacent to them, or also for artillery and tanks, units up to 2 axes away, as long as there is a clear line of sight. Attacking is simplicity itself. You count the total combat strength of the attacker, in this case would be 12, against the total defense of the defender, 12. You divide the strength of the attacker by that of the defender, you turn that into a ratio, and then you look at the combat table, which is up there. In this case, 12 against 12, you would use the 1-to-1 column. Terrain also may give modifiers. What I like in this game, don't worry about the Chinese table. There's also an English version of the table in the instructions. What I like about this table is that there are modifiers for attacking into a certain type of terrain, which is pretty common in war games. If you're attacking up a hill, that usually gives a bonus to the defender. But also you have modifiers for attacking out of certain axes. For example, attacking down a hill also gives you an advantage. So I like the fact that there are bonuses and penalties in defense and in attack. So you attack adjacent units, or if you have long-range units in a line of sight, you can attack units up to 2 axes away. Find a column, roll the die. You may have a modifier based on terrain. Also the Kuomintang's tanks have a modifier because they're just so powerful. You cross-reference the the column that you're using with the modified number you roll. And you'll find 2 numbers. The first one applies to the attacker, the second one to defender. The number indicates the number of hits that are inflicted against that side. Hits can be absorbed by the side that suffers them as retreats or as step losses. If you lose a step, then you simply flip the corresponding unit and to its reduced side, a reduced unit is eliminated. Each such reduction is a step that is lost, is a hit that is absorbed. You can also choose to absorb hits by retreating. There are restrictions. The Chinese player can only retreat towards north, the Kuomintang player only towards the south. There are certain types of terrain in which you cannot retreat. You may have noticed that on the table, on the attack table, there are some numbers that are in red. In that case, that means that not all of the hits can be absorbed as retreats. At least one has to be absorbed as a step loss. Also, there is another interesting thing, which is pursuit. If a unit retreats and moves adjacent to an enemy unit that has not attacked, then the other unit can attack the retreating unit. And if the retreating unit takes hits, this time those hits cannot be absorbed as further retreats, they can only be absorbed as hits. So it's a very powerful technique if you manage to place your units well, to force an opponent to retreat and then to attack the retreating units to inflict a lot of extra hits. Because otherwise, it is not always easy to inflict hits. You sometimes have to encircle your opponent between a line of your own units and terrain that the opponent cannot use to retreat, because otherwise units are pretty sneaky and you can get like, I push you back, then you push me back, then I push you back, then you push me back. There are ways to go around that. The first turn or two that I was playing, I was like, oh, nothing is happening. Then I figured out that there were indeed ways of eliminating enemy units, but you kind of had to work on creating a good position in order to do that. Also, an interesting thing is that you have a stacking limit of 3 units per hex, and when you're attacking enemy units, you cannot combine units from multiple hexes. For example, in most war games, when you are attacking adjacent units, you can combine all of your units into a single attack. In most war games, you'll be able to use these 3 units and these 2 units all together against that one. Not in this game. In this game, you can only attack from one hex into a single hex. That means that the maximum number of units that can attack together is 3. This is pretty important because Chinese units have big combat numbers. If the Chinese player piles up a bunch of these big units, then it's very hard for the Kuomintang player to put together an attack with 3 units that matches that one. That means that by itself, just in the open field, the Kuomintang player will be at a disadvantage. It seems like there wouldn't be many ways for the Chinese player to break a large group of Chinese units that has a large cumulative combat strength. So in order to do that, you do have to work on maneuvering and positioning. You do have to create situations in which you inflict more damage on the opponent, or you inflict damage in such a way that the opponent has to take it as casualties and you can take it as retreat. You do have to manipulate the system or to work creatively within the system in order to be able to counterattack and to defend against the Chinese player when you're playing as the Kuomintang player. That's it. That's pretty much it. You draw chits, you move, you attack, you continue like this until all the chits have been drawn. Tactical chits are played in various times during the turn to grant bonuses, and you continue like this, turn after turn, until the end of turn 5, or, well, the game can end earlier. The Chinese player needs to take control of that hex by turn 2. If that doesn't happen, the Chinese player loses the game, and the opponent wins the game. However, once the Chinese player has established that, now the Taiwanese player, the Kuningtou player, needs to take control or to retain control of important locations. One is this hill here. If the Communist player takes control of that hill, the Kuomintang player loses the game immediately. And later in the game, if the Chinese player takes control of that hex, so the city of Kinmen, which also has very good defensive bonuses, if that happens, too bad. The Kuomintang player loses the game. If the game does not end because of control of key locations on the map, then victory is established at the end by counting the number of losses that each player has inflicted to the opponent. The player that has inflicted most damage at that point is the winner. This is a very simple game, incredibly straightforward, it's incredibly simple, especially if you play with the basic rules only. Even with the advanced rules, it doesn't get exactly too complicated. It could work as an introductory war game, and that is an advantage. I also think that this is probably mainly the way you will use this game if you decide to pick it up as an introductory war game, or Also, another possibility, of course, is as an illustration of the battle. If you're interested in historical events, such games are always a good way of getting a better grasp on the historical dynamics of what went on the battlefield. I, for example, didn't know anything about this battle. I looked into it because I was curious about it, since I was going to play the game. I learned something more. I'm happy. I'm always happy to play new games and learn something as I do that. So I would really say introductory war games is an introductory war game for introduction to wargaming. You could use it as an introduction to the historical event if you're interested in learning or teaching something about this event. These are mainly the main uses, really, because the game doesn't have all that much. It is well done, it is good, it is solid. It is just that it's so economic, so simple, the map is not that large, that it doesn't really get super mega exciting, super mega tense. It is also pretty short, which is an advantage. On one hand, you can set it up fast and play fast. On the other hand, the situation is pretty limited. Another thing is that the replay value, to me, is pretty low because the overall script is strict and it will tend to present itself more or less the same game after game. The communists have to come from the north, the Kuomintang player has to try to put together a defense on the northern coast and to hold that area for as long as possible. The communist player has a strong desire to push towards the first objective that he needs to take control of. After that, the communist player can in fact choose to concentrate his efforts towards taking one of the two main objectives. Can try to go for the hill, go for the city, try for both. The Kuomintang player will have to react to that. But even if you have, say, the strategic, so to speak, objective for the Chinese player can change, and that will bring different strategies from game to game, the overall idea remains the same. The Kuomintang player starts weak, not too many units on the map, units that are definitely outgunned by the communist units. Then reinforcements pop out of nowhere, and you will have a lot of small Kuomintang units running around like crazy and trying to exploit terrain and position to stop the Chinese behemoth. So the game doesn't have so much room for experimentation. One of the advantages, on the other hand, is that it works very well as a solitaire game, as most games with the chat pull mechanic do. So there are pluses and minuses. I would say nothing too much on the side of the minus. I can't pinpoint anything that I dislike about this game. Everything works well. On the other hand, there's nothing that raises to the level of masterpiece or that is really earth-shattering, or even just that, well, that gives you that level of engagement that more sophisticated games do. It's a trade-off. You can't have them both. You can't have a sophisticated, complex, nuanced game and something that is so simple, so easy to play, easy to learn, and quick to play. You have to choose one of them. This game definitely is on the side of the introductory war game. Very simple war game. It's not bad, but I would say, to sum it up, that is an okay game. Not bad, not too exciting. It's okay.